The Middle East conflict between the Palestinians and Israel has been raging for many years. Over the years, there were many attempts to negotiate a lasting peace, but all failed. Meanwhile, the toll of human life kept rising. Every year, every day, and sometimes every hour. Finally, there was a glimmer of hope, starting with the Madrid Conference in 1991. 2 years later, in Oslo, Norway, after a long, secret negotiation, an unprecedented declaration of principles was agreed upon, based on the exchange of land for peace. New hope seemed to be on the horizon.
Together, today, with all our hearts and all our souls, we bid them shalom, salam, peace.
There were many obstacles to peace. The status of 5 million Palestinian refugees scattered throughout the region, the borders between the two sides, and the future control of the borders with neighbouring countries, the sharing of the world's holiest city, Jerusalem. But a major obstacle was advancing, and this put Ramallah and Tel Aviv at odds. The Israeli colonies, or settlements, in the heart of Palestinian land. This obstacle was a direct threat to the guiding principle for the entire negotiation: land for peace.
The Israeli settlement policies started almost with the beginning of the occupation. The different Israeli governments had different understandings of the same concept of settlements.
The first settlement in the West Bank had been constructed a few weeks after the 1967 war. That was the Kfar Etzion. A year later, a bit more than half a year later, 1968, a group of settlers had moved to Hebron. They had moved to Hebron by the agreement back then, which had been done between them and the military. They were supposed to stay in Hebron only for a week and only during the Passover.
Within 2 weeks after Israel conquered, already there were plans for settlements. There were plans for what we're going to keep. There were plans of giving Palestinian areas back to Jordan. The Jordanian option was the option of the Labour Party. So that the idea that this is our country, we've now grown our country. Now the trick is, how do we keep it and keep control of the land and make this all the land of Israel, but get rid of the Palestinian population? That, until today, from 1967 until today, remains the essential issue.
Even those settlements were deeply rooted within the Zionist ideology. No clear policy within the ruling Labour Party of Israel had been set on how to begin the settlement enterprise. All changed in 1974 with the formation of Gush Emunim, the Bloc of the Faithful. The ideological settlement movement was born in the settlement of Kfar Etzion by some fundamentalist rabbis who claimed to be called by God to extend the borders of Israel from the Jordan to the sea.
The ideology is that Zionism and the will of God coincide here on the land of Israel. That this land was given to the Jewish people by God, and nobody, no government, no individual has the right to give a piece of this land to anyone besides a Jew. It comes from the ideology of Rabbi Kook, the Orthodox Zionism, which didn't have the opportunity in 1948 to actually exercise this ideology because the original Zionism movement was secular.
Gush Emunim struggled to find its place within the primarily secular Israeli society and ruling Labour Party. But in 1977, with the election of Prime Minister Menachem Begin and his appointment of Ariel Sharon as Minister of Agriculture, they found their champions. The partnership between the hardline Begin and his settlement bulldozer, Sharon, changed the face of the occupied territory. By the time Mr. Begin left office in 1983, more than 100 settlements scattered throughout the occupied territory were now home to the most fundamentalist settlers.
Sharon was appointed by Begin to be the head of the Ministerial Committee on Settlements. Sharon was charged by Begin with two things. One, to create facts on the ground, settlements, roads, infrastructure, everything. Facts on the ground that make it impossible to disconnect Judea and Samaria from Israel, to make Israel's presence irreversible, and secondly, to foreclose forever the establishment of a Palestinian state.
The departure of Begin did not signal any significant change. His successor, Yitzhak Shamir, was a graduate in the same school of thought, hardline Zionism. In 1983, the Israeli Ministry of Agriculture and the World Zionist Organization published a master plan that called for 43 new settlements, 300 to 450 kilometers of new roads to connect and serve the settlements, and proposed quadrupling the number of settlement residents to 100,000. The successive Labour government, headed by Shimon Peres, continued building settlements. Settlement building is not the policy of the left or the right. It's the policy of Israel, no matter who is in office. One after the other, each and every Israeli Prime Minister since 1967, with no exceptions, contributed to the building up of settlements. Benjamin Netanyahu shocked the Palestinians when he decided to appropriate one of the most beautiful hills of the land for the settlement of Har Humar. This was the strongest signal to the Palestinians that Oslo was not working. Oslo did not manage to dismantle a single settlement. To the contrary, Israel was taking more Palestinian land. Ironically, after 1993 and the signing of the Oslo Agreement, Israeli policy toward the settlements took a drastic turn, which led to significant growth in the settlement's size and population. During the 7 years following Oslo, the settler population within the West Bank increased by 90%. The sharpest increase occurred in the year 2000, during the term of Prime Minister Ehud Barak.
In terms of the population growth in the West Bank, and in terms of construction of permanent houses, apartments, infrastructure in the West Bank, Those years were actually the mid-90s, the years after Oslo Agreement.
When we were supposed to be building confidence, building trust between the two sides, to get to an end of conflict. However, Israel had something else completely in mind. They were trying to create facts on the ground in an unprecedented pace in order to dictate the outcome of the negotiations and not reach a negotiated settlement. Prime Minister Barak in Camp David, he was claiming he's giving everything, giving the moon. But what an ugly moon it was.
Following international pressure to stop settlement construction, the Israeli government began new tactics. Under the pretext natural growth, they expanded and fattened the existing settlements and connected them to each other and to Israel. The result is huge blocks like the Ring of Settlements in Jerusalem and the blocks of Ariel and Gush Etzion, which slice the land and block any possibility of a contiguous Palestinian state. The mastermind of this policy is Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. The Israeli settlements started looking like a permanent occupation to the Palestinians. Hundreds of settlements and outposts scattered throughout occupied Palestine make the map of the West Bank look like Swiss cheese. The Israeli policy of creating permanent facts on the ground was working.
Israel wants the world to see Judea and Samaria as an integral, natural part of the land of Israel, and then later of the state of Israel. And therefore, its policy is defined as one that makes that reality permanent. This isn't a tactical thing. It's not that we're building settlements so we can be stronger. We're building settlements as permanent extensions of our cities. Ariel is an extension of Tel Aviv. Ma'ale Adumim is an extension of Jerusalem.
These settlements, along with their bypass road network and security zones, occupy about 42% of the land designated for the future Palestinian state. New road construction throughout the world generally means growth and better accessibility. In contrast, roads between settlements can only be travelled by settlers. For Palestinians to drive on these roads, they must obtain special permits, which are extremely hard to get. The basic human right of freedom of movement within one's own country has been taken away from the majority of Palestinians and considered a privilege for a select few.
Here's where the highway system feeds in and the whole infrastructure, because you create a landscape in which, you're in Ma'ale Adumim, in the middle of the West Bank. Well, but with a beautiful highway, you can go to Ma'ale Adumim, you can go home and back, you work in Jerusalem, home and back in 15 minutes, with a beautiful highway, never encounter an Arab, never, God forbid, you never go through an Arab village or neighborhood or anything else. You stay completely in a Jewish-Israeli environment. So you come from Jewish Jerusalem, you go down the beautiful Jewish highway, through a Jewish landscape of the land of Israel, which is all idyllic because you don't see Arabs. You get into your Jewish dormitory suburb, go to your Jewish swimming pool at the end of the day, and everything is normal. It's banal. It's not an issue. It's not political at all.
The locations of settlements are chosen carefully. Most are located on the tops of hills and between Palestinian towns and villages. The majority of these settlements have no proper sewage system. leaving their wastewater to run through Palestinian agricultural land, causing great damage to the people and to the environment. Settlements squander valuable and needed